how does a single military strike in one country become a global flashpoint, seemingly overnight? Well, today we're going to unpack exactly that, how the U.S. capture of Venezuela's president lit a fuse that led to a massive diplomatic showdown with some of the world's other major powers. So how did we get here? Let's break it. It really all boils down to this simple fact. One event, but two totally different realities. For one side, it was a necessary action against a corrupt leader. But for the other, it was an illegal act of international aggression. This is the story of that huge divide. All right, so where did this all kick off? It started fast with a military operation in Caracas that almost immediately pulled other global players right into the middle of it. And when I say fast, I mean fast. The situation just exploded. First, boom, U.S. Special Forces launched these huge strikes in the capital, Caracas. Next thing you know, President Trump is confirming they have Nicolas Maduro in custody. And then, almost before the dust settles, Russia is on the phone, making its position incredibly clear. Now, to get the U.S. perspective, you kind of have to rewind a bit. This wasn't some random move that came out of nowhere. Tensions had been building for years, and Washington had actually put a $50 million bounty on the table for any information leading to Maduro's arrest. They were citing charges of narco-terrorism and corruption. So, from Washington's point of view, this operation was really the final move in a long game. They had already officially called Maduro's presidency illegitimate, they'd indicted him and his inner circle on some pretty serious criminal charges, and they were very open about their goal. They wanted to shape what comes next for Venezuela's government. But, of course, Washington's actions didn't happen in a vacuum, and they definitely did not go unnoticed. The first, and by far the most forceful response came from Moscow. And look, this wasn't some carefully worded, vague diplomatic memo. No way. This statement came out right after a direct phone call between Russia's foreign minister and Venezuela's vice president. The language they used is just incredibly strong. They're not calling it a police action or an intervention, they're calling it armed aggression. So right away, Russia just elevates the whole conflict. They framed it not as some regional issue, but as a direct threat to the entire world order. Their message was simple, and it was aimed at every single nation watching. If a powerful country can just decide to remove the leader of another one, then really, who's safe? And it turns out Russia wasn't going to be alone for long. The condemnation started to spread, and pretty soon a unified bloc of opposition to the U.S. operation started to form. Then Iran jumps in. And they didn't mince words either. Their foreign minister called the Venezuelan leadership directly and labeled the U.S. operation state terrorism and the abduction of a legitimate president. You can just feel the language getting more and more intense with each new player. And just when you think the opposition can't get any louder, China breaks its silence. Their foreign ministry said it was deeply shocked and accused Washington of hegemonic behavior, which is basically a way of saying they're acting like an unchecked global bully, and of trampling all over Venezuela's sovereignty. So, what's the common thread in all these condemnations? Well, it was a clear, unified message. Russia, Iran, China, they were all hammering the same core points. This was an attack on the very idea of national sovereignty, a dangerous precedent that threatened not just global stability, but peace across all of Latin America. And all of this set the stage for a really fundamental conflict. One that wasn't being fought with armies, but with language, with legitimacy. Two completely opposite narratives just emerged from the smoke. Just look at the contrast here. It's pretty jarring. Where Washington saw an illegitimate leader, the opposition saw armed aggression. Where the U.S. saw drug trafficking, they saw a violation of sovereignty. Washington's goal to shape the future was, to them, straight-up state terrorism. It's like two different worlds were describing the exact same event. Russia probably summed it up best with this really chilling assessment. This wasn't a disagreement you could just negotiate your way out of. In their eyes, this was a fundamental clash of ideologies, a point where diplomacy itself had just been thrown out the window. So, why does all this matter? Why should we care about what happens in Caracas? Well, because what started there didn't stay there. It exposed this deep, dangerous fault line running right through global politics. This whole incident is a textbook example of what we call a global diplomatic confrontation. It's not just about Venezuela anymore. It's about major world powers lining up in opposing camps, drawing lines in the sand, and fighting over how the world should actually work. And that, right there, is the crucial takeaway. This is so much bigger than one country or one leader. Venezuela just happened to become the latest flashpoint in this huge ongoing global struggle, a struggle over who has power, who gets to set the rules, and what's considered permissible on the world stage. Which leaves us with this one final, vital question. In a world with all these competing powers and clashing ideologies, who really gets to decide a nation's fate? Is it its own people, a neighboring superpower, or is it an alliance of powerful nations on the other side of the globe? That is the question right at the very heart of this crisis.